Well, new inflation data is showing prices accelerating here to a 4-month high in September. Core PCE index, which excludes the volatile food and energy prices, rising 0.3% on a month-over-month basis, up 3.7% on an annual basis. Here with more on how that's impacting the manufacturing sector. We also want to talk about the latest of the UAW strikes. Also, a new results study out today. We want to bring in Jay Timmons, National Association of Manufacturers CEO. Jay, it's great to have you here in studio. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Great to be here.
Yes. So let's start with the latest print that we just got on inflation. In terms of what you're hearing from your members, how big of a headwind, how big of a challenge is this persistent higher cost, higher pricing environment for their business right now?
So I think you have to look, Shauna, at all of the cost pressures on manufacturing. Bottom line is we want to make sure that manufacturing can compete with the rest of the world. That means you can't drive up costs, right? So you think about the things that we can control. You think about labor costs, you think about regulatory costs, you think about energy costs, but then inflation is factored in, and that's kind of on top of all that. So we do hear from our members that there is a lot of headwind out there when it comes to the inflationary pressures, but I have to say I think it's easing a little bit. You saw it on that chart, slightly easing, and we feel pretty good that the inflationary pressures are going to be coming down a little bit next year.
So one of the things you talk about is labor costs, and obviously we know a lot of focus has been on the UAW and the strikes there. So with where things stand now, are you concerned about the continued effect to, say, smaller manufacturers?
So that's a perfect question, Diane, because that is exactly where I think the pressure hits. So if you think about that supply chain and all of the downstream effects of a striking company, for instance, or a company that's on strike, you find that these smaller manufacturers are having a really hard time making the choice about, frankly, keeping their doors open or laying people off for a certain amount of time. And if they lay those folks off, are they going to go somewhere else? And then they're not going to be able to bring them back. We do have a labor shortage in manufacturing, 600,000 open jobs. So anything that really upsets that delicate balance, it's a threat to manufacturing.
Do you think the view is still that workers have the upper hand, given the fact that we have seen a rising number of strikes across the country, given the fact that we have seen this union movement? Is the power still mostly in the hands of employees?
Look, I don't know that if I want to handicap who has the power balance. What I would say is that when you have a strong relationship between management and workers, that's when you're the most productive. Culture really matters, right? How you operate your facility, how you treat your employees, and good management worker relations is really what manufacturers try to strive for. Sometimes you see, and we have unionized and non-unionized shops. Yeah. Sometimes you see large labor leaders who are not as in tune to or don't really care about the relationship that perhaps has grown over time. I don't want to opine if that's what's happened here or not. I can say, though, that it's never good when there's strife between the workers and management.
So deal makers say the best negotiations and the best deals are when both sides win. Can both sides win when you think about UAW and the automakers for GM, Stellantis?
So as long as labor leaders are looking at the pressures that exist for corporations today, I think both sides can win. Again, every deal is going to be different. One of the ways that they need to be looking at the issues coming at manufacturers is, again, those cost pressures. We've just released a study about the regulatory burden on manufacturers that is showing that today it's $3 trillion worth of regulations on the entire business community. About $350 billion of that is on manufacturers alone. That's about the $3 trillion is about 12% of our GDP. And that's bigger than, the $350 billion, I should say, is bigger than the GDP of 29 states. So those pressures are really adding up. And by the way, that translates to $29,000 per employee per year for a manufacturer, or $50,000 per year per employee for a small manufacturer. And you think about all the regulations that are coming down the pike that are not even included in that figure, those numbers are adding up, and they're adding up quickly.
Well, Jay, when you talk about the problems that are coming, challenges that are coming from these regulations that have been put in place, I guess which ones, can you identify which ones are most problematic? And when you look ahead to 2024, you mentioned more regulations obviously coming down the pike. How much more of a jump you see that potentially getting when it comes to the cost per employee?
That jump is going to be significant because of the things that are coming down, as well as the fact that many of those regulations are conflicting with each other or taking products offline like ethylene oxide, which sterilizes our hospitals, and we won't have anything to do that with if that regulation takes effect. But I think back to the Obama administration's particulate matter 2.5 regulations. And those at the time cost $350 billion for manufacturers. Well, today we're talking about lowering that number even more, and it could put 40% of our country in a non-attainment area, which means no manufacturing investment, no job growth, which of course means no wage growth for manufacturers. That's counterintuitive to the president's agenda to grow manufacturing in this country. I mean, you think about chips and science and infrastructure investment and the policy provisions of the IRA. That was all geared toward growing manufacturing in the United States, and unfortunately, the president's agencies are not listening to what he's trying to achieve.
All right, Jay, we'll have to leave it there for now. Our thanks to Jay Timmons, National Association of Manufacturers CEO.